Good evening. Being married to Napoleon Bonaparte is not so much a romance as it is a full-scale military campaign where the battlefield is your uterus, your social calendar, and occasionally, your sanity. Tonight, you get to be Napoleon Bonaparte's beloved wife and the Empress of France. If this steamy time travel teaches you something, please toss a subscribe if you haven't already done it. And tell me in the comments what part of the world you are from, so the rest of the world can wish you a good night's sleep. I hope you truly love the stories I share with you all here. Now, turn down the lights, draw the curtains shut, slide into your sheets, and let's begin. If modern dating is text back within 3 hours or it's over, then your situation is receive deranged love letters from the front at 3 a.m. describing in the same paragraph artillery maneuvers and how much he misses your unwashed private parts. All you know is the smell of him, of you, of France, of history. By the end of this, if you don't smell of gunpowder, roses, and light emotional damage, we've done something wrong. You are not Joséphine. Yet. You are Marie-Josepha Rose Tasha de la Pagerie, which is a perfectly respectable name for a Martinican-born aristocratic girl who survives hurricanes' colonial awkwardness and the general French talent for making everything beautiful unsafe. You've already done the starter kit of late 18th century trauma. Widowed? Check. Almost guillotined? Check. Robespierre falling just in time to prevent you from losing your head? Also check. So by the time you meet Napoleon, you are not some wide-eyed ingenue. You are, in military terms, a deeply upgraded survival unit. You know how to flirt to save your life, how to dress to manipulate a room, and how to smile politely while the entire political system sets itself on fire again. Paris, mid-1790s. The revolution has eaten several courses of its own children and is now picking its teeth. The guillotine is still warm. The perfume industry is still trying to pretend everyone doesn't reek. And you, a nearly 30-something widow, which in this era is halfway to antique, are circulating among salons, charming every man who is either important, thinks he's important, or is at least rich enough to send flowers. And then in walks the man who will make complicated husband look like a lifestyle brand, a small, intense Corsican general named Napoleon Bonaparte. You notice 3 things immediately. First, the eyes, dark, heavy-lidded, staring at you like you're both a strategic objective and a slightly disappointing sandwich. Second, the posture, not tall, not tiny, but carrying himself like gravity is a suggestion, and the room is already his. Third, the smell. A cocktail of horse, sweat, leather, and a faint suggestion of this coat has seen things. Napoleon's relationship with bathing is, shall we say, sporadic. Let's call it episodic hygiene. He courts you with the grace of a cannonball, passionate, clumsy, relentless. You're older, more experienced, and frankly more socially upgraded than him, which only makes him more obsessed. He renames you because of course he does. You go from Rose to Joséphine, as if he's revising you like a draft of a speech. This is the first hint that you are not marrying a man. You are marrying a project manager with an army. You say yes for reasons that are not exactly Cupid. You have children to protect. You need stability, or at least the 18th century version of it, which is fewer guillotines, more silk. He offers you security, a future, and the kind of ridiculous, operatic devotion that might be useful. Also, he's going places, political places, loud, canon-adjacent places. So you marry him in 1796, in a ceremony that is charmingly inaccurate. You shave a little off your age on the paperwork. He shaves a little off his. And together, you create a legally sanctioned lie that will confuse historians and amuse future YouTube audiences. The witnesses are late, the paperwork is sloppy, and the whole thing feels less like a royal union and more like an after-hours admin task. 48 hours later, he leaves. This is the rhythm of your life with Napoleon. You get him in brief, intense bursts, and then he disappears into the horizon, followed by drums, cannons, and the smell of unwashed ambition. The Italian campaign calls, and he answers. You, however, are expected to sit in Paris, embody grace, and pretend you are not slightly irritated that your honeymoon is mostly postcards from battlefields. The letters begin. He writes like a man trying to conquer the continent via ink. He tells you about victories, about maps, about how soldiers adore him, about treaties and triumphs, and then abruptly about how he wants you, misses you, needs you, and would prefer, if at all possible, that you avoid bathing before he gets home. He wants you as you are, natural, authentic, marinated. You, who have spent years mastering the art of surviving in silk and powder, are now dating the patron saint of please don't shower. And this becomes the running tension of your marriage. You are the empress of appearances. He is the emperor of overwhelming reality. You manipulate fragrance. He weaponizes funk. You braid society into submission. He smashes nations and then asks how your roses are growing at Malmaison. While he's away in Italy, you build your own empire, the social one. The salons of Paris are full of women who know that if you can't vote, you can at least control the men who can. You cultivate charm like a weapon. You gather artists, politicians, bankers, gossip, information. You host dinners where the food is questionable, the wine is abundant, and the subtext is lethal. You also, crucially, get lonely. Your husband is physically absent and emotionally omnipresent, like a very needy god with a military budget. He writes constantly, but ink is not touch, and Europe is full of attractive, well-bathing officers. Enter Hippolyte Charles, one of the more famous non-Napoleons of your life. Affairs in your world are less moral collapse and more standard operating procedure among the elite. Fidelity is a nice theory, like constitutional monarchy or universal equality. The practical reality is, everyone is sleeping with everyone, and as long as the correct people pretend not to notice, civilization continues. So you take a lover, maybe more than one. Historians argue you are politely not answering. The important part is, you are not a marble statue waiting on a pedestal. You are alive, and while Napoleon is out there reinventing warfare, you are reinventing survival. He finds out, of course, not immediately, but eventually. There are letters, rumors, reports. The great genius of Europe can track troop movements across mountains, but he can also track vibes, and the vibes are, Joséphine is not entirely alone. His jealousy is legendary. He rants, fumes, sends more letters. In some, he begs. In others, he scolds. Occasionally, he sounds like a man arguing with himself in 3 registers. But he does not leave you. Not yet. Because you are more than just a wife. You are an asset. You are a connector, a symbol. A woman who can walk into a room full of suspicious Ancien Regime survivors and make them believe this new general might be worth betting their fortunes and their lives on. When he returns from Italy in triumph, You do the thing you are best at. You make his success look inevitable. You stand at his side as the city cheers, your dress whispering luxury, your smile announcing, yes, this is the future, and yes, I picked it. Then he goes to Egypt. Because when you are Napoleon, you don't just conquer Italy and take the win. You decide that what you really need right now is a vaguely defined campaign on another continent, built on half-baked logistics and full-baked hubris. Egypt is sand, sun, plague, and a lot of very unimpressed ancient ruins. Also, more smell. So much more smell. He goes, you stay. Again. This time his letters arrive slowly, full of heat and dust and grandiose visions of empire, stretching from Paris to Cairo. He is sleeping with other women, Pauline Forez, for one, whom the soldiers nickname Napoleon's Cleopatra, because of course he is. You are not naive. You invented not being naive. You both cheat. You both know. The right term here might be mutually assured delusion, but the marriage continues. Then, one day, history shifts. He comes back from Egypt, not just as a general, but as a political meteor. France is tired of chaos. The Directory is flailing. People are nostalgic for a nice, tidy dictatorship with good branding. Napoleon offers exactly that. There's a coup. The consulate is formed. Suddenly, you are the wife of the first consul, the de facto ruler of France. This is your real battlefield, not Austerlitz, not Marengo. The drawing rooms, the gardens, the corridors of newly refurbished palaces, these are where you operate. At Malmaison, your country estate, you build a world that looks like stability. You reshape French taste, lighter fabrics, empire-line dresses, classical columns in the living room. A whole aesthetic that future fashion historians will name after your husband, and then quietly admit you did most of the curating. You love roses. You plant them obsessively. You import exotic plants, exotic animals, and exotic artists. Malmaison becomes the opposite of the front. Where he orders cannon fire, you order tea. Where he moves armies, you move chairs, flirtations, and patronage. People come to you before they go to him because you, unlike your husband, understand that not every problem can be solved by yelling forward and staring at a map. He comes back from battles and drops into your world like a meteor into a porcelain shop. He stomp walks through the salons, still half in uniform, boots muddy, brain running on casualty lists and logistics. You can almost see his aura of exhaustion, desperation, and stale sweat. You greet him with calm, scent, softness. You are the human equivalent of a scented candle in a war room. You, who now own more bottles of perfume than most counties have priests, are constantly negotiating with your husband's heroic but deeply questionable hygiene. There are baths, but not enough. There is cologne, but he uses it like artillery applied in aggressive bursts, without subtlety. In public, though, you are perfect together. The people adore you, or rather, they adore the idea of you. The graceful Creole empress in waiting, who humanizes the terrifying little general with the big plans. You are soft power in a world that worships hard power. Then comes 1804, Emperor time. Napoleon has decided that first consul is too modest, and Guy, who basically runs everything, lacks the right ring. So he invents a new empire, with himself on top, like a very aggressive wedding cake figurine. You are about to become Empress of the French, which sounds glamorous until you realize it mostly means more ceremonies, more outfits, and more responsibility for everyone's emotional expectations. The coronation at Notre Dame is a theatrical event calibrated down to the last bead. The Pope is dragged from Rome to bless this new arrangement, because if you're going to rebrand monarchy after a decade of beheading monarchs, you might as well involve the Vatican. You stand there, heavy in silk and jewels, the cathedral thick with incense, sweat, and political tension. The crowd's breath condenses in the cold air. You can hear armor clink, fabric rustle, whispered gossip behind fans. The organ thunders, the banners hang. Somewhere in the rafters, pigeons are deeply unimpressed. And then comes the moment. The crown. Technically, the Pope is supposed to place it on Napoleon's head. Symbolically, this would say, look, God approves this power grab, but your husband is Napoleon, which means rules are merely decorative suggestions. He takes the crown himself and puts it on his own head, like a man DIY installing his own divine right. Then he crowns you. For a second, the entire world narrows to weight on your skull and heat from the candles and the sound of thousands of people trying not to gasp too loudly. You are crowned by a man who, only a few years ago, was a sweaty little general writing you questionable letters from Italy. Now he is emperor. You are now empress. It's intoxicating. Not just the incense, the power, the theatre, the sense that you have ridden history itself like a very unstable horse and somehow stayed in the saddle. But behind all the drama, there's the quiet, unmentionable fact that grows heavier every year. You have not given him a son. You have children from your first marriage, Eugène and Hortense, clever, loyal, and beloved. Napoleon adopts them, loves them, promotes them. Eugène becomes a prince, a general. Hortense marries into Napoleon's family and produces a child who will later be Napoleon III. But for your husband, this is emotional compensation, not constitutional security. He wants an heir, a biological one, a little Bonaparte missile he can aim at the future. You are in your 40s. Your body has already done its reproductive duty. You've endured pregnancies, births, fear, and grief. Your womb is not a fresh battlefield. It is a veteran. But the empire doesn't care. Dynasties care about blood, not context. So begins the slow, horrible campaign. Operation Replace the Empress. You feel it before anyone says it. The advisors whisper. His siblings, who already resent you for being older, foreign, socially superior, and better dressed, push. He hesitates. He loves you, or whatever the Napoleon equivalent of love is, obsession plus dependency plus control. But love in this world is not a trump card. The state needs an heir. You try. There are rumors of miscarriages, of nervous attempts to fix what biology has already decided. You visit healers, pray in your own way, do the sanctioned rituals of hope. You wear lucky charms under silk. Nothing changes. And so one day, he tells you. The correct terminology might be divorce, but what it feels like is being declared strategically obsolete. Not a bad wife, not a failed consort, just not useful enough to the dynasty. The ceremony is brutal in its politeness. The imperial family is assembled. You stand there while he reads out the reasons like a bureaucrat explaining why a policy must change. He speaks of duty, of France, of gratitude. You weep. He weeps. Everyone cries, because this is an execution without a blade. You agree publicly, because what else can you do? Refuse, and you become an obstacle. Consent, and you can at least retain your dignity, your title, Dowager Empress, and your estates. You sign away your marriage with a shaking hand. Your heart does not break cleanly. It crumbles, bit by bit, like an old letter left out in the rain. If this were a modern rom-com, this is the point where you'd move to a cute apartment, start a small business, and discover yourself through pottery. Instead, you move full-time to Malmaison, your palace of plants and memories, and begin your late-game transformation into the world's most elegant historical ghost. He marries Marie-Louise of Austria, a teenager with a Habsburg jaw and a womb presumably more in line with imperial expectations. You watch from afar as portraits circulate, showing the fresh new empress, the enviable baby, the happy nuclear empire. You are replaced in state portraits, but not, annoyingly, in his brain. Because the thing about Napoleon is that he does not actually stop loving people. He just rearranges them in his internal filing system of priorities. You go from wife and partner in building my new France to first great love, regrettably deprecated for reasons of dynasty. He writes to you still. Less frequently, but with that same emotional whiplash. One paragraph about troops in Germany, another about your health, your garden, your roses. He asks after Malmaison's orangery, its greenhouse. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers march and die across Europe, and this man still wants to know if your magnolias bloomed. The empire crests. Then, as all ridiculous power structures eventually do, it begins to crack. Spain is a swamp of guerrilla warfare and bad decisions. Russia is a white, frozen monument to overconfidence. You are not on those campaigns, but you feel them like a pressure change in the air. The letters grow darker, the casualty lists longer, the victories smaller. You age into your dignity. At Malmaison, you host less frenetic soirées, more reflective gatherings. You surround yourself with art, music, and your children. You are still a node of influence. Ambassadors drop by. Hopeful courtiers still seek your blessing. But you're no longer on the cutting edge of power. You are its echo. You walk through your gardens, past the roses that have seen more political shifts than some parliaments, and you think about your life as a sequence of rooms you survived. The plantation in Martinique, the Paris prison where you waited for the guillotine, the salons of the Directory, the imperial throne at Notre Dame, the divorce chamber, the quiet bedroom where your dresses hang like retired soldiers. You no longer live in the hot, chaotic scent cloud of early revolutionary Paris. Now your days smell of damp earth, cut flowers, polished wood, and the faint starch of folded linen. But every so often, when you catch a whiff of leather and sweat from a passing officer, your brain goes straight back to him. The little general who never met a bath schedule he couldn't ignore. By 1814, your health falters. A cold, then pneumonia. The doctors apply leeches, potions, and confidence in that order. You sit wrapped in shawls, shivering in rooms that never quite get warm enough. Outside, the world is catching up with Napoleon. The Allies are closing in. Paris is vulnerable. The empire is wobbling like an over-decorated cake. You die before it all collapses officially. You do not see Elba, or Waterloo, or St. Helena. You do not watch him shrink from living emperor to exiled myth, pacing on a rock in the Atlantic, haunted by regrets and liver issues. You exit history at Malmaison, surrounded by flowers, maybe thinking of your children, maybe thinking of him. Here's the part they don't tell you in those neat, sanitized timelines. He never gets over you. Not in the operatic way movies like to pretend, but in the quieter way reality prefers. Years later, on St. Helena, he speaks of you often, scholars report. Of your charm, your grace, your infuriating debts, your affairs, your laugh, your smell. He calls you the one he truly loved, which is both flattering and annoying, because it would have been nice to lean on that sentiment before the whole divorce for the sake of France thing. From your perspective, yes, you, the you we've been inhabiting this whole time, Napoleon's life is not just a sequence of campaigns and treaties. It is the story of a man who loved like he fought, intensely, selfishly, strategically, and with a stunning disregard for collateral damage. You saw him as few did. You saw Napoleon, the awkward romantic, pacing in small rooms, dictating letters that veer from military briefings into horny poetry, asking you not to bathe as if that's a sexy compliment instead of an olfactory war crime, begging, sulking, raging when he thinks you don't love him enough, or at least not in the exactly correct ratio of devotion to admiration. Napoleon, the workaholic tyrant, sleeping in 4-hour bursts, if at all, between battles and councils, eating fast, badly, and usually in the wrong order, cold chicken, strong coffee, more strong coffee, treating his own body like a tool that might break but probably not today, because he has plans. Napoleon the socially confused, rolling his eyes at aristocratic small talk while needing aristocratic money, mutually despising your fancy friends while desperately needing their legitimacy, standing in rooms you curated, wearing clothes you approved, projecting power you helped scaffold. And Napoleon the petty, human husband, suspicious of your spending, constantly oscillating between scolding and spoiling you. You, in contrast, wielded power differently. Your weapons were perfume, fabric, and light. Control the ambiance, control the mood, control the outcome. Information, gossip, and sympathy. People tell the well-dressed, sad-eyed woman everything. Patience, timing, and an almost academic understanding that men who move armies are still, in the end, boys trying to impress somebody. When textbooks summarize your role, they say, Joséphine helped solidify Napoleon's social standing and contributed to the creation of the empire style, which is like saying, she was a supporting character, but in reality, she was his only emotional infrastructure. You kept the whole thing feeling like a civilization instead of a prolonged military cosplay. You turned his brute power into something people could wear, walk through, and live in. Without you, it's just uniforms and guns. With you, it's fashion, gardens, salons, gossip, scandals, and the illusion that all this conquest is in service of beauty. And yes, the scandals, your affairs, his affairs, the jealous fights, the public reconciliations. You two operate like a celebrity couple whose PR team is constantly exhausted. In an age without Instagram, people still know everything. The streets buzz with theories. Did she cheat? Did he? Is she sterile? Is he cursed? Somewhere in between the gossip and the truth lies the absurd reality. Two people trying to be both human and symbolic in a world that punishes humanity and demands symbolism. Napoleon's simping, as the modern classification committee would put it, is not exaggerated. The man thirsted, he wrote, he panted, he obsessed. He swung between worshipping and resenting you with the same intensity he used to swing between alliances. You were his first victory over chaos and his most enduring defeat. Consider the letters. He tells you he'll be home soon. He's not. He tells you he's faithful. He isn't. He tells you to please, for the love of everything sacred, not get sick, not get old, not get distant, as if you had that kind of control. You, for your part, tell the world nothing. You are a professional in the art of the half smile. Your emotions are smuggled out through fashion choices, guest lists, and suddenly cancelled invitations. If we zoom out, mock scholarly for a moment, Joséphine's perspective is the missing footnote in the grand narrative of Napoleonic glory. Historians chase battles, they map troop movements and casualty ratios. They sometimes forget that while the cannons roar, someone is rearranging the chairs in the parlor, wondering if her husband will still need her when the smoke clears. Why does it matter? Why does your point of view count in the audit of this overachieving Corsican's life? Because your life shows what all this power actually felt like. For the state, the empire was a tool. For Napoleon, it was a performance. For you, it was a series of rooms, dresses, glances, contracts, pregnancies that didn't come, tears shed behind fans, and roses planted in defiance of history's indifference. You remind us that world-changing decisions are often made by exhausted people in cramped rooms that smell bad. Great men write embarrassing letters. Dynasties are built not only on bloodlines, but on the unpaid emotional labor of spouses who were never asked if they wanted to be a historical institution. The edge cases of your life are almost comically cruel. You are almost guillotined, then become empress. You are adored by the people, but discarded by the system. You outlove your marriage, then outlive your place in its story. Absurd, yes, but then so is an artillery officer from Corsica crowning himself Emperor of the French. In the end, your story is less about being Mrs. Napoleon and more about being the person who saw the man inside the myth. The short, smelly, brilliant, infuriating creature who held Europe in his hand and still couldn't hold on to the one relationship that actually made him feel human. Because if we strip away the incense, the roses, the gunpowder, the perfume, the sweat of marching armies, and the starch of court uniforms, what's left is this. History doesn't smell like marble statues, it smells like people. People in love, in fear, in silk, in boots. People like you, struggling to reconcile your private heart with the public theatre. You are Joséphine. You loved a man who tried to conquer the world and failed to conquer his own need for you. You watched him rise. You helped him rise. You let him go so his empire could have a son. And then you lived on among your roses while his legend spun further and further away from the person you knew. If some modern narrator were to summarize your entire experience in one crisp, unfair line, it might sound like this. You married ambition, slept beside chaos, divorced an empire, and still ended up as the only thing the great Napoleon couldn't outgrow. For our second story tonight, you are not just some cozy insomniac with Wi-Fi and questionable sleep hygiene. Tonight, you are Charles Dickens, which, to be clear, is great for your literary legacy, less great for your family, and absolutely catastrophic for anyone foolish enough to invite you to Christmas dinner. Because here's the core tension of your life. By day, you are the sentimental architect of Victorian compassion, the man who literally invented the modern idea of Christmas as a festival of warmth, charity, and tiny crippled children teaching adults about the true meaning of love. By night, and occasionally by seaside afternoons, you are a manic, theatrically deranged, control-obsessed man who might suddenly grab a random young woman on the beach and insist you must drown together for love. You could call him a complex figure, but really, do not invite this man to Christmas. Let's go to 1812, into a cramped house in Portsmouth, England, where you are born on a cold February day to a family that specializes in financial chaos and emotional overcommitment. You come into the world as the second of 8 children, your first great achievement being surviving infancy in a century that kills babies like it's a hobby. Your father, John Dickens, works as a clerk in the Navy Pay Office. He's charming, generous, full of stories, and absolutely terrible with money. Imagine a dad who would buy everyone in the bar a drink, then forget the rent, then act surprised when the landlord appears. Again, and again, and again. Your mother, Elizabeth, is bright, energetic, fond of social aspiration. She wants the family to seem respectable. Respectability in early 19th century Britain is not a lifestyle, it's a religion. There are rules, proper clothes, proper accents, proper furniture, proper lying about how broke you are. And you, small Charles, are the quiet observer. Big eyes, sharp ears, soaking in every conversation, every quarrel, every awkward pause when someone mentions unpaid bills. You are building what scholars would later call the Dickensian imagination, and what we might call a lifelong content farm powered by unresolved trauma. In your early years, the family moves to Chatham. These are, by your later account, the golden days. You roam the countryside, you read voraciously. You fall in love with stories, Smollett, Defoe, Fielding, and with little theatrical performances. The smell of damp earth, coal smoke, and your father's endless optimism wraps around you like a slightly mouldy blanket. You are not yet the man who will emotionally destroy audiences with the mere word Christmas. For now, you're just a shy kid pretending to be other people and filing away every detail. The creak of boots, the wet slap of mud, the way adults' voices tighten when money comes up. You're building your whole moral universe in secret, like a novelist-based operating system quietly installing in the background. And then London happens. Welcome to 12 years old. Your father's financial chaos finally hits critical mass. Debts pile up, the cheerful promises stop working. The respectable facade cracks, and one day the bailiffs come. The law doesn't care that you, the future great novelist of the English language, are in this house. The law just cares about unpaid money. John Dickens is dragged off to the Marshalsea debtors' prison, a grim complex where financial failure is turned into prolonged public shame. Your mother and siblings follow him inside, because debt isn't just a legal status, it's a family lifestyle. You, however, do not go to prison. You go somewhere worse. You go to work. At 12, you are sent to Warren's Blacking Warehouse, a rat-infested factory on the Thames, where you spend long days pasting labels on pots of shoe polish. The air tastes like vinegar, glue, and failure. The floor is slick. The river just outside smells like sewage and industrial runoff, with a delicate top note of dead things. You stand at a workbench with other children, some younger than you, some permanently stunted by labor. Your fingers ache, your back burns. Your brain repeats one phrase over and over: I was not meant for this. And here, in this gloomy warehouse, the Charles Dickens you think you know begins to form. The writer of Orphans and Cast-Offs, the man who will one day conjure Oliver Twist and Little Nell and Tiny Tim. He is born somewhere between the rat droppings and the paste. You feel betrayed by the adults who were supposed to protect you. You feel abandoned by your mother, who, long after your father is released from prison, thinks maybe you should stay at the factory a bit longer because the income is useful. Scholars suggest you never fully forgive her for this, which is understandable. Thanks, Mum. I love my childhood of industrial adhesive and despair. Meanwhile, your father does get out, and eventually you do leave the warehouse. You return to school briefly, but the damage is done. You're no longer just a boy. You are a grudge with legs. Fast forward to your late teens and early 20s. You teach yourself shorthand, the Victorian equivalent of mastering Excel so you don't die. You become a parliamentary reporter, racing from the House of Commons to the press, your brain a machine for absorbing and reproducing endless argument. This job does two crucial things. First, it gives you material, pettiness, hypocrisy, windy speeches, the entire circus of public life. Second, it gives you power because every word you write becomes print, and every print becomes reality for thousands of people who will never see the debates themselves. You walk the streets of London for hours. This is your thing, your ritual. Other people sleep. You walk for miles through fog and stink and gaslit alleyways. Think of it as early Victorian street view, except you're also your own car, your own camera, and your own slightly unhinged commentary track. Step 1. Walk until your feet are numb. Step 2. Stare into windows, doorways, pubs, courts, all the tiny theatres of human misery and comedy. Step 3. File it away for later use, which is to say, weaponizing it in fiction. Eventually, you start publishing sketches under the pen name Boz. They are funny, vivid slices of London life. People like them. The right people like them. And then, in 1836, something enormous happens. The Pickwick Papers. You are 24. You marry Catherine Hogarth, the daughter of a newspaper editor. You have a steady gig, monthly installments of a comic novel about the adventures of a bunch of middle-aged gentlemen. At first, the series flops. Then you introduce Sam Weller, the witty servant. People lose their minds. Suddenly, you are not a desperate blacking factory child. You are a phenomenon. Victorian England learns your name and then refuses to stop shouting it. New Pickwick numbers are devoured the way people binge shows today. There are readers clustered at bookshop doors. There are fans waiting on the docks in New York for ships carrying the latest installment. You have invented, in effect, the cliffhanger. The serialized novel becomes the Netflix of its day. Cheap, episodic, addictive. You ride this wave with Oliver Twist, Nicholas Nickleby, The Old Curiosity Shop, Barnaby Rudge. You write fast. You write in serial. You write under pressure from publishers, readers, your own perfectionism, and the constant threat that if you stop, the entire enormous structure of your life, family, status, income might collapse like a badly built stage set. And with each book, you build your public persona. You are the champion of the poor, the scourge of workhouses, the patron saint of orphans, the guy who shows up in print to ask, "Hey, have we tried not crushing children into economic dust?" You lecture, you campaign, you support charities, you rage at bad schools, bad laws, bad landlords. You are, in modern terms, a blend of best-selling novelist, social justice influencer, and full-time content creator with no upload breaks. And then there is Christmas. Ah, Christmas, the holiday you will hijack, rewrite, and repackage as a sentimental reboot of humanity. Before you, Christmas is fine. A bit of church, a bit of food, some greenery, but not the full cinematic production. After you, it becomes a ritual of snow, feasts, family reconciliation, and moral redemption available in convenient paperback form. In 1843, you publish A Christmas Carol. It is short, it is sharp, it is shamelessly emotional. Ebenezer, Scrooge, you conjure, is the anti-Christmas spirit until ghosts break his soul open like a cheap ornament, and he becomes the poster child for humanitarian capitalism. You write it fast, pressured by debt, a and by your own sense that something in the national mood needs thawing. When it lands, it detonates. Plays, readings, adaptations explode everywhere. People start sending Christmas cards, giving more to the poor, and pretending they have always known the phrase Merry Christmas as something other than a vaguely cheerful grunt. You, Charles Dickens, have become Mr. Christmas. Just a reminder, Charles Dickens is the last man you should invite to Christmas dinner. Because behind this public image, this glowing halo of sentiment and generosity, is a secret life stitched together from control, obsession, theatrical pranks, and deeply uncomfortable romantic decisions. Let's talk about the house, the domestic arena, the Dickens family experience. You and Catherine have 10 children, 10, double digits, in a house full of noise, ink, drafts, food, servants, more noise, and your constant need for everything to be just so. We could call it Victorian fertility, but really, no one is ever getting 8 hours of sleep. At first, it's charming. You play, you perform, you organize elaborate games and amateur theatricals. You are the life of the party, the center of gravity, the sun around which everyone orbits, whether they like it or not. You have a manic sense of humor, one that does not always land in the harmless fun category. You invent private languages and insist on using them. You babble nonsense at home in voices and accents, sometimes for hours. You perform characters in daily life, slipping into roles as if your own personality isn't quite enough. And then there are the pranks. Reports from friends and acquaintances describe you as the kind of man who would sprint up to strangers in the street and shout bizarre riddles at them. Not, "Excuse me, sir, do you know the time?" More like, "What is the sound of an onion in Parliament?" in some invented accent, before vanishing into the fog. You are, essentially, a one-man flash mob without consent. And then there is the seaside incident. One particularly unsettling account describes you on a beach, locking onto a young woman you barely know, grabbing her, dragging her down toward the water, and theatrically insisting that you have fallen in love, and that you two must now drown together. She, understandably, is horrified. You, reportedly, are fully committed to the bit. This is not a 5-second joke. This is a full skit in which terror is a prop. Eventually, people intervene. No one dies. Except perhaps the mood. Here's where historians lean in and start using phrases like eccentric behavior and unsettling anecdote. The rest of us might go with, "This is not normal party conduct." And again, making a note in the file, "Do not invite him to Christmas." Because imagine this man at your Christmas table. You're carving the turkey. He's speaking Italian-German gibberish at the pudding. Your aunt is trying to describe her year. He's halfway under the table, reenacting a courtroom scene with the salt and pepper shakers. Then he theatrically declares love for the neighbor's daughter and suggests a joint drowning in the punch bowl. HR for the gods, as we might say, would have follow-up questions. But the chaos at home is not just comedy, it's also control. You demand order. You rearrange furniture obsessively. You plan routes for guests. You direct conversations like scenes. You are generous and kind until you are not. The line between warmth and temper is razor thin. Catherine, your wife, bears the brunt of this. She is pregnant, often, tired, often, overwhelmed, always. She is also, in your eyes, increasingly not good enough. Not agile enough. Not lively enough. Not spiritually in sync with your manic need for movement and novelty. And then, one day, in 1857, you meet a young actress named Ellen Nellie Ternan. You are 45. She is 18 or 19. She appears in one of your amateur productions. You are the star, writer, director, producer, and walking ego. She is shy, delicate, talented, and half your age. You become obsessed. From here, your life splits in two. The visible life of the great man, the writer of Little Dorrit and Great Expectations, and the secret life of the man who maintains a concealed relationship with a young actress while publicly gaslighting his wife into oblivion. You set Ellen up in discreetly rented lodgings. You provide her with money. You travel with her under the flimsiest of pretexts. There are hints, letters, fragmentary testimonies. We do not have every detail, because you very efficiently burned or destroyed many of the papers that would have made historians' jobs easier. Did you and Ellen have children? Some scholars cautiously suggest at least one possible pregnancy, maybe more, with a baby who may have died in infancy or been quietly placed elsewhere. We do not know for sure. Victorian secrecy plus destroyed letters equals permanent ambiguity. What we do know, you loved her, or felt something very much like love. You risked scandal in a society where adultery could blow up a reputation overnight. You built a double life so elaborate, it makes modern finsters and secret second families look like amateur hour. Meanwhile, Catherine is publicly humiliated. In 1858, you separate from her. And you do it with flair. You publish a public statement, because of course you do, insisting that you and your wife are simply incompatible and that she is mentally fragile, and that rumors about other women are vile lies. You release this statement not just once but repeatedly, even sending it to newspapers. This is not just a breakup, it is a PR campaign, politely called domestic separation, but really it was reputation management via open letter. You move Catherine out. You stay with most of the children. You install a sister-in-law, Georgina, as an emotional anchor in the household, prompting its own round of gossip and speculation. You obsess over your honor, your image, your right to define the narrative. The man who writes so tenderly about the suffering of women and the oppressed shows very limited tenderness to the woman who carried his 10 children. This is the tension of being Charles Dickens. On the one hand, you are the conscience of your age. You give voice to injustice. You design some of the most vivid, moving characters in literature, many of them poor, working class, or female. On the other hand, you exile your wife, possibly father secret children, terrorize strangers with pranks, and literally drag a young woman toward the sea for a dramatic fake suicide pact. Again, the Christmas invite is not looking good. Let's talk about your work habits cum rituals, because they are a whole topic. A typical Dickensian day. Wake up early. Write, standing at a high desk, for 5 hours straight. Pace, mutter, act out dialogue, wave your arms like a conductor of invisible orchestras. Rewrite obsessively. You are your own editor, critic, and worst enemy. Walk, like really walk. 10, 20 miles through London and beyond. Rain, fog, night, perfect. Return home, possibly play with children if in good mood, possibly fume about something if not. Eat, see friends, read proofs. Not sleep, or sleep badly, and dream in serialized chapters. You are, in short, the classic Victorian overachiever. If the Industrial Revolution had a human mascot, it would be you, scribbling copy while your arteries slowly turn to chalk. And then there are the readings. Oh, the readings. Public readings start as a way to support charity. You stand on stage and perform scenes from your books, voices, accents, tears, rage. You are electrifying. People weep. Grown men sob at the death of little Nell. Women faint. Tickets sell out. You discover that you, Charles Dickens, are not just a writer. You are a performer, a rock star of the spoken word. So you monetize it. Hard. You tour across Britain, then across the Atlantic. You read A Christmas Carol so many times that Scrooge becomes less a character and more a possession. You do Sikes and Nancy, from Oliver Twist, a brutal murder scene with such intense fury that people in the audience turn pale. This is not your gentle, sentimental side. This is your ability to weaponize language, to put your entire nervous system on the line and let the audience watch you tear yourself apart from the inside. Step by step, the Dickens reading experience. Step 1. Arrive in a town already buzzing with newspaper hype. Step 2. Walk onto a stage lit by gas lamps, throat raw, heart racing. Step 3. Become in rapid sequence a dozen characters, sobbing, laughing, snarling. Step 4. Receive thunderous applause, flowers, tears, possibly marriage proposals. Step 5. Collapse backstage, utterly wrecked, then do it again tomorrow. Over time, the readings consume you. Health cracks, your heart protests, your nerves fray. But you cannot stop because the applause is addictive, the money is excellent, and the persona, the great man of letters, is a beast that must be constantly fed. And somewhere in the middle of all this, in 1865, you get on a train. You are travelling back from France with Ellen Ternan and her mother. The presence of your mistress on this trip is, again, not something you want the entire world to know. So the documents and seating arrangements are vague. The details are hazy. Near Staplehurst, Kent, the train derails. The bridge is under repair. A section of track has been removed. Your carriage and several others plunge into chaos. People die. Bodies are mangled. Screams rip the air. The carriage you're in dangles at an angle. You survive. You climb out, assist the wounded, provide water, comfort, improvise bandages. For hours, you are a sort of field nurse. This is your best self. Practical, brave, compassionate in the moment. Later, you will write about the accident, but carefully omitting any mention of Ellen. The public sees the heroism, not the mistress. Your life is saved, but something fundamental jars loose. Your health, already fragile, worsens. Your sense of mortality sharpens. You drive yourself harder anyway, because of course you do. In the last years, you write Our Mutual Friend and begin The Mystery of Edwin Drood, a novel you will never finish. You keep touring, reading, writing, reorganizing, controlling, burning letters, polishing your legend. You send sons to the colonies when they disappoint you. Several end up in debt, exile, or failure. You are merciless about their shortcomings, in a way you never were about your fictional sons and daughters of poverty. You keep seeing Ellen in secret. She becomes your companion, your comfort, your unsanctioned partner in a world that officially refuses to name her. She survives you, erasing as many traces of the relationship as she can, trying to live a life that isn't just a footnote to yours. And then, on June 9th, 1870, after a day of work on Edwin Drood, you collapse at your country house, Gad's Hill Place, stroke, paralysis, silence. You die the next day. You had wanted a quiet burial, perhaps in Rochester. The nation decides otherwise. You are interred in Westminster Abbey, in Poets' Corner, amid the great cluster of British literary dead. the man who wrote about poorhouses and slums is laid to rest in the architectural equivalent of a national LinkedIn flex. In death, your double life remains mostly hidden. The affair with Ellen is an open secret in tiny circles, a rumor in others, a blank space in official biographies. For decades, the saintly image dominates. Charles Dickens, moral reformer, family man, embodiment of Victorian virtue. It takes time and access to private papers for the messier picture to emerge. The pranks, the drowning joke, the cruel letters about Catherine, the obsessive image management, the Ellen question, the sons packed off to distant shores. And this is where we, lying here in the 21st century, with our insomnia and our endless scroll, have to decide how to feel about being Charles Dickens for the night. On the one hand, you changed how people think about childhood, poverty, charity. You created characters so enduring that their names are adjectives. Scrooge is not just a man, it's a diagnosis. You turned Christmas into a kind of annual moral audit disguised as a feast. On the other hand, you used people emotionally, domestically, theatrically. You rewrote your own life to cast yourself as the hero, even when the script didn't really justify it. You treated your wife and, at times, your kids with a coldness you never extended to fictional strangers. You are, in short, not a monster, not a saint, but something much more common and much more unsettling. A brilliant, damaged, charismatic man who turned his trauma into art and his flaws into other people's problems. Your secret life isn't just about Ellen, or pranks, or weird beach theatrics. It's about the gap between the stories you tell and the life you live. You can almost picture it, Victorian London as one huge, dimly lit stage. The gas lamps glow, the fog curls. You stride on, in black coat, bright eyes, full of talk about compassion and justice and the poor. The audience roars, they adore you, you bow. Behind you, off stage, stand Catherine, Ellen, your frightened children, the young woman who never again went to the beach without scanning the horizon for overexcited novelists. And someone in the metaphorical control room quietly raises a sign that reads, "Reminder, do not invite this man to Christmas dinner. Because if you do, he will probably rearrange the furniture, announce that you're all spiritually wrong about pudding, terrify the neighbors, and then shout an open letter to the local paper from the hallway about how misunderstood he is." So as you lie there now, half asleep, half in Victorian London, ask yourself, what is more Dickensian, the snow, the carols, the glowing hearth, or the uncomfortable fact that the man who sold you that dream was just as messy, selfish, needy, and theatrical as anyone he ever wrote? Maybe that's the final twist. The technical term might be literary legacy. The practical term is this: every time you read A Christmas Carol and feel your heart soften, remember that human beings do not come in tidy morals, not even the ones who write them. And if, late one night, there's a knock at your door, and a bearded Victorian gentleman asks to come in for supper, and a harmless little prank, put away your thoughts, shut your eyelids tighter, and, for the sake of everyone at the table, do not invite Charles Dickens to Christmas dinner.